Hello and welcome to another real estate webinar at Savills. I think here at Savills we are determined to look past the coronavirus crisis and try and predict what life will look like after all of this passes. Today, I think we want to explore some of the key trends and themes and the results from the EMEA-wide office fit survey, addressing the impacts of COVID-19 and how that has changed our thinking and accelerated the evolution of the office for both occupiers and owners. My name is Richard Paul. I'm your host today on what hopefully will be an insightful and thought-led discussion. This is our fifth webinar episode in the 2020 season within the Middle East region, all of which have discussed real estate tipping points and impacts. All previous webinars can be accessed via the Savills Middle East Impacts landing page, and also be sure to tune in to the episode 6 of our webinar series on the 10th of November, which will cover the growth of the life science sector and the opportunities that may raise for the Middle East. Today, as I've said, we'll be discussing whether the residual effects of COVID-19 will fundamentally change how we work. The concept of office space has undergone significant changes over the past few decades. It's evolved from uniform cubicle setup to open plan desk space into a more flexible and co-working environment. This has been slowly driven by changing business requirements, as well as in part evolving employee needs and demand. However, the onset of COVID-19 and the pandemic has led to a dramatic shift in our working pattern, as work abruptly moved from traditional office environments to a home setting. For some companies, the transition was seamless, partly due to the nature of their work, but also due to the prior investments they'd made into technologies that promoted and supported remote working. As lockdown measures now wax and wane in different parts of the world, certain sectors and economies are slowly returning to a new level of normality. The longer term impact of lockdown and the consequent compulsory work from home structure that were applied are still being debated. What were the benefits, but also what were the pitfalls? In light of the social and technological shift, the concept of the office building and the concept of corporate headquarters as we once knew it are being appraised. According to the recent EMEA-wide fit survey from Savills, during the first wave of that lockdown, 89% of respondents believe that the physical office space will remain a necessity for companies to operate successfully. Our findings would strongly suggest that the office won't disappear, but it will likely change. A change that will look to instill a work-life balance with a renewed focus on physical and mental health, as well as productivity and efficiency. Office space plays a crucial role in recruitment, retention, productivity, and the ability for a firm and the employee to meet their own objectives. Increasingly, companies are looking at their real estate space as an enabler to attract and retain talent in the respective industries. It's clear from the Savills Fit survey that employees now prefer more autonomy on how and where they work, but that does differ depending on age bracket. Sustainability and environmental impacts of an office space is also a key consideration. This impact has been largely driven by millennials, who now constitute a very large share of the workforce globally. Companies need to respond to these new demands and perhaps turn to a more human-centric design to create more engaging environments. As part of the discussion today, I'd like to delve a little deeper into the above trend. We seek to understand from multinational companies on how their real estate strategy will likely change going forward. How can landlords respond to these changing dynamics and ensure their development stay relevant and competitive? What can we learn from the recent technological advancements and their implications on working styles and productivity? And how is the office being perceived by companies across different sectors? Now, I think you struggle to find a better qualified group of people to discuss this topic. But before I introduce the panel, I think I'll introduce firstly Nikki Whiteman, a director from Savills in our emerging trends team. Now, Nikki's woken up very early. The clocks went back the other day in the UK, 4 hours behind, and I think from Cambridge this morning in England. Nikki was part of the team that carried out the fit survey and was a co-author of the report. So I think it's probably best that we ask her to comment first. And perhaps share with us some of the key findings from the Office Fit survey that are still very much relevant to all markets. Good morning, Nikki.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you so much for inviting me along. Yeah, I think we have a slide that we're going to show, which hopefully will capture some of the major findings of the survey, which I will just take you through. Thank you. That's great. So as Richard, as you pointed out, this was a survey that was conducted during the early part of the lockdown in the UK, with the intent of trying to understand where sentiment was sitting and allow us to look at that sentiment and determine how that might then go on to affect the quantum, location and design of office space. And here you're just seeing some of the key findings. I should say this document is still available and we can certainly make that available to you subsequently if that's helpful. I'm just going to quickly this morning just spin through some of the key findings. It is important, I think, to say that this was a survey that was conducted much earlier this year and something that we are intending to resurvey now in light of some of the changes we're all experiencing since the early part of the year. Richard, you touched on the notion of this being different at a generational level. I think I'd like to start there, really. Certainly, our survey was picking up an idea that, of course, none of this looks the same for different individuals. And certainly we were seeing that for younger people, the challenges of this whole experience and the home working situation were perhaps greater than for others. The notion of learning to do work, the need to be mentored, the relationship between work and our social life, I think we've all experienced this perhaps stronger when we are younger. The sorts of the place that we live and the place that we work from, if we're working at home, may well be more challenging for a younger person. So certainly we were seeing, I think, in the early stages, and I'd say that this is something we're certainly seeing now, this idea of this generational piece is hugely important. But I would say a number of months on, we'd probably build on that to say the important thing probably to recognise is the difference here that we're seeing, the difference between geographies. Certainly when I talk to my colleagues around the Savills business, there is huge difference in the experience both of the pandemic and of course the difference in just work culture. All of this builds to make a very different picture depending who you're talking to in which part of the world. Overridingly, a difference in sectors. Different business sectors will have experienced this differently. Office needs are different across different business sectors and also business units within organisations. Many organisations will be experiencing certain teams find the transition to a home working environment considerably more easy than others. And fundamentally here, of course, there's an individual difference. I think we've all experienced the pandemic differently. We will have different views at an individual level about our choices about living and working. And here we're very much seeing, I think now, that sense that this is a very unique situation for us as individuals. I think organisations will be working very hard to understand what we as individual employees, the talent, the drivers of the business are thinking and feeling. We're certainly seeing lots of organisations do their own surveys to understand workplace sentiment and try, where possible, to engender as much choice and autonomy. Richard, you mentioned autonomy. I think that word choice, autonomy, those are going to be very important in the workplace of the future. I want to pick up on this notion of hybrid, you see that hybrid model. Certainly from this survey, there was a sense that, a recognition, I suppose, that some work happens well in a home working environment or a third space. Obviously, before the pandemic, we worked in lots of different spaces, not just this sense of home or office. And of course, I think we're now seeing that really hardened sentiment about the notion that some work happens well at home. Of course, other work happens very well in a work environment where we have the opportunity to meet with our colleagues, our teams, our mentors. And this hybrid model, I certainly in certain geographies where for safety reasons, of course, some organizations are not able to have all their people back in the office, a hybrid model where you spend some of your time at home, some of the time in the office. One imagines that this is something that is working relatively well for individuals and organizations. So this sense of there not being a one size fits all, I suppose, is quite important. Again, coming back to choice, autonomy, the balance of that hybrid will probably look different for organizations, for business units, and for individuals. The location piece, huge amount of work happened in this space. So for me, I come to this as someone, I was one of the co-founders of the Savills Tech Cities program, which is a program we've run with the World Research Team for a number of years now. So I've spent a lot of my time working with Savills thinking about the nature of urban and urban environments and working and living in urban environments. I suppose the question now is, to what degree post-pandemic, what is this relationship between work, living and the nature of urban? And to what degree will people be looking for different living and working environments? I do think this story intersects very much with the residential story. If we see this movement residentially where people perhaps move more towards less urban environments, how does that interface with this hybrid working? If, for example, you don't have to travel every day into an office space in an urban environment, perhaps will you choose to live a little further out than you might otherwise have done with your traditional commute? This, of course, does talk to the commuting story. The Savills What Workers Want survey had already found this relationship between the notion of work and commuting. Not surprisingly, the further you commute, perhaps the more you would like to work at home. So this whole story of working, living, commuting, I think is incredibly interesting right now. But of course, it's very early to say. Organizations will be embedded in leases. Individuals will take time to make decisions about where they want to live and how they will want to work. So some of this at the moment remains an unknown. But perhaps some of the consequences are the nature of a hub and spoke model for organizations, perhaps a headquarter space in an urban location with more localized offices, which allow staff to engage at a more local level. A suggestion possibly of a business park model, or something of a resurgence in a business park model when you think about the nature of open green spaces. Those, again, the suggestion perhaps we might see some renewed interest in the business park. And of course, this demand for flexible space, flexibility, I think, for all of us being fairly key at the moment. Design. So this piece within the survey was conducted by the Savills Workspace team, KKS, and as you see here, this sense of this ongoing impact on office design, this real acceleration into what we were already seeing about the agile workspace and workforce. For me, I guess I was already, I suppose, talking and had always talked about the notion of workspace being a place that you needed to, I suppose, to want to come to. At the heart of this, a sense that we already knew that people could work online. We knew that if you wanted people to come to work, you had to create spaces that they would want to come and spend time in. I think, of course, that this has been an acceleration into that. We will all need to work much harder to create spaces that people genuinely want to come to. It's a little, I suppose, like the retail story. If you think about what's happened in retail space, the emergence of e-commerce means that physical retail spaces need to work much harder to create physical presence. If you think about how work now operates, we know that we can work online. If we're going to make the journey to come to a physical space, there needs to be really something worth our while when we get there. So that's going to be incredibly important. The nature of what good looks like, I suspect, is going to change. At the moment, of course, we're all thinking primarily about safety and health and well-being, those very much embedded into the future, but then thinking thoughtfully, I suppose, about what is good going to look like? Why would I make the journey to come to a physical space? I would also, however, add on to that sense of why would I want to come? There is also going to be the question of why do I need to come to an office space? I said at the beginning that this looks different for different sectors. Some organisations fundamentally need space to do what they do. If you're in the life science sector and you need lab space, if you are in the gaming sector and you need studio space, these are the kinds of organisations that need special space to work in. You don't do that necessarily at the kitchen table. I think this will be a question of really understanding different sectors and their bespoke needs and what they genuinely need to see out of physical spaces. Finally, I think, Rich, you touched on the environment. Before the pandemic, we were facing a global climate emergency. That has clearly not gone away. And I suppose that this environmental question, I think there's so much more work to do in this space. I'm expecting and hoping to see a great deal of work about the relationship between travel, living and working, and the environmental and obviously impact of that. But I think as we move through different seasons, I'm already seeing commentary about the notion of home working, and if you cool or heat your home and work at home vis-a-vis the impact of office spaces. And I suppose finally, this whole notion of environment for me will be absolutely key, not least because, of course, we're now all working online. I think more thought will go into the impact of online. Just because we don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not having an impact. So lots of work, I would say, for organisations to do about being thoughtful about what environmental impact will look like in this whole new future of living and working. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to the rest of you. Hopefully that will be a provocation for the rest of the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah, I think so. I think some of the things you said, particularly on the design side, is going to come to the fore. And I feel that, yeah, creating space that people want to come to, but also creating space that then promotes promotes things that businesses want out of people, whether it's coming with ideas, coming in with enthusiasm, coming to promote a business, and you need an environment to do that. So but as you said, this is early days, really, in how this will evolve. And when you're doing this study initially, it was during the lockdown, during the sort of the peak of the pandemic across Europe, and people's opinions may change since then, and they will do into next year as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. If we now could push on to the rest of the panelists, and as I said earlier, I think we would struggle to find a better group of people to talk on the topic. So let me introduce them. From internally, and I think from our Dubai office, Paula Walsh. Paula heads our international corporate services team in the Middle East. What Paula and her team don't know about the office markets in our region is not worth knowing. She represents clients from all over the world, and she's been involved in some of the biggest office leasing deals to date in the Emirates. So good morning or good afternoon, Paula. How are you?
Good, thanks, Rich. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon.
Not at all. We also have on the webinar Ben McGregor, Investment Director at ICD Brookfield. Ben represents Brookfield in the joint venture with ICD. Ben has been involved in the full development life cycle of ICD Brookfield Place, Dubai's newest premium office accommodation based in the DIFC. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Also from Dubai, Ketan Trian, Sales Head of Executive Centre here in Dubai. Executive Centre is a global premium service office solution provider. Ketan has a strong understanding of client needs and business requirements, having worked with a broad range of enterprises and global corporates. So welcome, Ketan.
Hi, good afternoon.
Also keeping an international feel, Silke Winter. I think you're joining us from Frankfurt in Germany. Silke works for Boehringer Ingelheim in their legal strategy and governance team. Silke is a sort of real estate professional through and through, with over 15 years of experience delivering both incremental, but probably more appropriate here, transformational change to corporate real estate. So welcome, Silke.
Thank you, Richard.
Paula, can I start with you?
Sure.
Since you deal with sort of multinational occupiers on a daily basis, you tell me, from the interactions with them, is the office sector done for, or we're going to see it progress?
No, the office sector isn't done for. I think we underestimate the importance of office space at our peril. I think without office space, it can be hard to maintain a company culture, creativity, collaboration, socialization for people. And I think we've seen even reported this morning that there's an element of working from home fatigue that has set in, with reports of longer working hours and Zoom burnout. So I think that the office space is still a vital element for international occupiers. I think to this point, we've seen a much more traditional workspace across the Middle East, where remote working, flexible working has been perhaps slow to become part and parcel of the way that people work here. I think we've seen much more development of that kind of structure, agile working, flexible working, working from home, remote working in other markets, particularly Western markets. That's been slow on the uptake across this region, but I think what we've seen in the last 6 months has certainly accelerated that trend. Where we will end up, it's probably still too early to say. But as referred to earlier, I think some kind of hybrid model will become the model of choice.
And in terms of being at the coalface and talking to these corporates, I mean, what is their feedback? Are they still looking beyond Corona pandemic and into the 3, 4, 5 years in the future?
Yeah, very much so. Most of our clients have a long-term strategy, and to be fair, a long-term commitment to this region. We've done a lot of re-gears and long-term renewals for our clients over the last 6 months, which I think just goes to demonstrate the commitment of corporate occupiers to office space and to remaining in this region. We've done a number of expansion projects, particularly Facebook probably being the key expansion project so far this year, the largest uptake of new office space here in Dubai this year. I think that just demonstrates the commitment of international occupiers to office space. How that will change and how that will manifest itself as we go into 2021, I think is probably another conversation. We'll pick this up again in 6 months' time. But certainly at this point, what we're seeing is no slowdown in the commitment of corporate occupiers to office space in the region.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Ben, if I can come to you, just off the back of what Paula said, from a sort of a landlord's perspective, in this sort of post-pandemic environment, fast forward 18 months, 2 years, maybe shorter, hopefully, do you think companies will rely on sort of traditional office space, and how will that hybrid of working from home develop?
Richard, look, the answer is, look, 100% they will rely on the office as a key focal point for the company, for culture, for enhancing productivity, education, all those attributes that the traditional office brings. There will be change. You know, we're seeing change live. Technology was already doing that, and it is a constant evolution of the way we work. People perhaps will demand and expect more agility in the way they work, which is a good thing, because we'll have more flexibility. We have the means to do work where we want it. But in terms of, as Paula touched on, there are a number of shortfalls that, it was widely spoken about that this is potentially the solution, the work from home. But the challenges are clear. I mean, we've all done it. And for one, the monotony of it was quite laboursome. You didn't really understand, you never really switched off, so you never really fully switched on, was what I felt. It's a Zoom fatigue, mental wellness. I think taking it broadly, people's training, you're bringing in new staff, the take up, the time it takes them to catch up because they don't have that interaction. They're not being able to collaborate and actually really getting to know people and communicate efficiently, which is face-to-face. Virtual will never replace that face-to-face emotional connection that you have with people and the understanding you get from that. The speed of information transfer from a face-to-face discussion would be, I don't know, I'm guessing it's 10% of the time you need to get it done through emails and phone calls and online. So The workplace will remain. We're seeing clear evidence of it at ICT Brookfield Place, tenants moving in. They had none of their employees at the work. Now we're meeting many of them that actually would just prefer to be 100% on. They might be rostered and they just want to have a single place. They want to have that social interaction. They want to be in a place where they can get to learn what their colleagues are up to, the ad hoc interactions, the other aspects of, you know, movement and wellness and collaboration that come from a vibrant physical workspace. So it's going to evolve, and that's a good thing. And we're seeing, you know, clear evidence that people will come back. And I think once you get to that critical mass, and you're potentially the outsider that's still sitting at home, it won't be long till you realise I actually need to be back in, because I'm not up to speed and as connected with the people that matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think even development of a career, depending on what stage you're at in your career, you know, yeah, you can go away and you can get on with your work, but in terms of that collaboration, being noticed, being seen, you know, looking to work your way up through a business, you've got to be there. You've got to interact with different people at all seniority and everything else throughout the business, right?
Yeah, I'll give you one little anecdotal fact. So, a recent survey suggested that 76% of millennials will consider a company's social and environmental commitment when they're choosing where they work. So, if consider you're a 20-something-year-old looking at what company you're going to choose in the future. One has a wonderful, vibrant physical workplace, a clear path of education, of how you're going to be interacting with your colleagues, a wonderful culture, and a good social aspect to it, because we're social creatures, versus a company that is working from home. Where are you going to choose? So it's really quite simple in the long run, I think, in terms of what companies will attract and retain the best talent. You need to have that great environment for a company to launch from.
Yeah. Agreed. It reminds me of talking to my father when, you know, he looks back at the 80s and the 90s, and he wanted to stay so close to the headquarters business in Birmingham. He had opportunities to work around the world, but he knew if he was around the world, then he wouldn't be seen by the people that make the decisions. So he wanted to stay close, and actually, this is sort of replicating that in a strange way.
That's true.
Silke, no, not Silke. If I can go to Ketan now. Ketan, as an office provider, from your perspective, what are some of the key factors that are going to influence office leasing decisions now going forward? And are you seeing that vary across sectors and regions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's as we've been discussing, it's ever evolving. We're seeing that potentially clients are probably looking at their long-term commitments and their long-term costs. And as a result, they're then reevaluating what they need now and what they potentially need in 12, 24, 36 months' time. You know, we all know the statistics there. We've done our own kind of internal research to it, that the office will never disappear. It's just how the office now functions may change. So more collaborative space, and also the growth of that business. So a company that may be establishing in the Middle East in Dubai may have some ramp up goals in terms of starting with 10 people as a core team, growing to 50, 60, for example, but they're not going to utilize that space for the additional 40, 50 people. So it's a great opportunity for them to come and establish in this space. That can be tailored for them with the right IT infrastructure, with the right coffee, for example. All those things that people really, really care about will help them kind of factor their decision. And certainly we're seeing the shift now from corporates to look at that, certainly in the region. Globally, I think corporates have always looked at a bit more of a flexible solution as a long-term solution. I think now in the region, we're seeing businesses that are maybe not looking at towards those traditional leases. They're looking at some more flexible option, so that they can save upfront costs, and then as they kind of grow, take on additional space and grow accordingly.
Yeah, that's interesting when you're saying about, you know, the right coffee. It sounds trivial, but actually those sort of touchy, warm elements of the workplace is actually those little things that make people feel good about where they go, right? So, you know, actually these sort of things will probably come into more focus, you know, as we go forward. Silke, over to you. I mean, as a sort of representative of a large multinational and a global pharmaceutical company, has the pandemic changed your view on office space requirements, and if so, how so?
Well, first of all, I think I personally think this whole the acceptance of working from home is a great step forward, especially in some countries and in some regions where it, you know, has culturally or just from your day-to-day activities just not really been a focus, and that we can now see it works everywhere, literally. So, but having said that, how it impacts the office requirement remains to be seen. That it could have an impact for sure, but nevertheless, it's now also you know, an impact of choice. Now we already at BI are having a smart working office concept. That means we have an activity-based working concept of choice, and now I believe that this remote work or this working from home just remains to or will become that element of choice as well. But the principle of the office going away, I don't see that at all, because it, you know, as we have said before, as Paula said before, as the office remains to be a place to come together. It remains to be a place to collaborate, to be, you know, be part of the corporate culture and to be socializing. It's so yes. And I think also that the emphasis on a workplace strategy will become more apparent, I think, at least in terms of BI, because you can have a kind of a framework of what kind of type of spaces you offer and how your work environment will look like. But nevertheless, the impact of remote work will differ from country to country and from culture to culture. And also to be, you know, as I said before, to be having that choice of on my day-to-day, you know, one day or throughout my day, maybe I even come to the office for half a day and then I'll choose to be staying at home again. But for that remote element to be basically part of that choice of the whole workplace concept.
Sure. And has Boehringer, have they engaged with their workforce in different parts of the world to ask them their view?
Absolutely. So as part of every real estate project, and we tend to do pre and post move surveys. So this the internal surveys just to also assess, you know, the needs of the individual teams and so of the individual employees as well. So now it will also become more and more focused on, you know, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, how do you see yourself, you know, if you had the choice, how many days a week would you see yourself working from home, for example? So we can then align that with the space requirement and the actual, you know, physical space need for an office.
Okay. And Ben, back to you, I guess, with the sort of the well-being of the employee more in focus and a kind of renewed look at and health and well-being. You know, what are landlords and you know, perhaps ICD Brookfield Place, what are they doing to differentiate their offering or its offering to attract and retain tenants?
Look, I think definitely a far greater focus on the physical asset that one is putting their company and the employees in. So, you know, I think sustainability has been mentioned earlier. CSR is really important. Occupational costs are constantly being looked at, particularly at times like now. So, you know, we really strived to hit the top benchmark there, which we attained, being platinum LEED, which I think is really important for all of us to look at that. And the built space is a big contributor to carbon emissions. So I think CSR there will be important when people are looking at things, the vertical transportation of the building, which interacts also with the densities right now in terms of the restrictions. How do you get up and down within the floor plates? Wellness, you touched on, huge. It's a big part of what people look at when they're selecting an employer now. We've incorporated a huge amount of green space throughout the building. So we've got 140,000 square feet of green space. Proven benefits, it reduces stress, it increases productivity and creativity. Those are great attributes to have in a workplace, that you can sit under a tree, you can think differently. Within those spaces, we've also incorporated, it was already in the design, but we're really encouraging it now, that really agile workspace in a different environment. So our tenants can take space within the building, perhaps a little bit less if they need to downsize, save cost. That's also enhanced through the efficiency of the floor plate, so they don't have to take as much because it's a logical floor plate. It's actually designed for the occupier in mind. But perhaps assume that your people are going to be more agile, and they have their wonderful, vibrant physical workspace. It's got all of the needs that one demands for work. Brings people together socially, brings ideas, innovation, but also have space outside of the office, but close by, where people can sit and work under a tree, think more differently, more creatively, go to the gym, these things right at the doorstep, the wonderful amenities that, one could incorporate. So, I mean, we could go on for a long time, but all the wonderful attributes of food and social, and we're building in community spaces for people to educate themselves. Yeah. A lot of these will be free of charge. So you go to the office for a purpose. It's got to be an enhanced experience, that people are going there because it's better than being at home. Yeah. It allows them to separate home and work, but go to an environment where you're going to grow as a human being. It's not just about pure work. It's about the before, the after events, how you can educate yourself, family, generally meeting people and networking. Those aspects are really important. So I think the office will have to very much be focused on the health and wellness of people, one from a COVID perspective, but also just the general wellness, and it essentially address like a full ecosystem of people's daily lives, not just a mundane office space that has very little with it. Yeah, it's more all-encompassing.
Totally agree, and sort of, as you say, try and relate all of those good bits also to work. So you don't get that Monday morning feeling. You get that, wow, I'm going to work to experience all of those things you just mentioned. So yeah, very important, I think. Nikki, back to you. I know that your background in advising office space with technology and gaming sectors. Can you share your thoughts on how tech, as well as perhaps some other variables, are going to play a role in the evolution of the office sector?
Yeah, so I guess technology plays a role in all parts of our life. And I suppose that familiarity with consumer tech is really where a lot of this stuff comes from. We're all very used in our day-to-day, technology is part of life. It's part of offices, it's part of home working now, very clearly. It feels to me as though we're likely to see more adoption of technology that pivots from home working environments to workspace. I suppose as a consumer, as a worker, what you need to experience is something that feels pretty seamless and allows you to work both at home, work in a third space, or come into a physical office space, and for your technology experience to join up, link up, and feel seamless with your organization and all the physical spaces that you're going to work in. I suppose it will play an important, it is playing an important part right now in terms of health and safety and well-being, whether that's sort of the development of contactless pathways through buildings, how you engage with physical and space, and the role that technology has in terms of problem solving around some of that, I think will be quite important. Excuse me. But I think, you know, as with the rest of this conversation, it's very much about an evolving situation. We are very early days, I suppose, in this conversation. Technology was always an important part of the real estate discussion. I think pre-COVID, many of the conversations I was having really was about technology in buildings and smart spaces. But I would say, actually, I'm thinking a lot at the moment about this piece around technology and environment. Technology definitely has the power to solve some environmental issues, to create better output, better performance for buildings. But equally, I think I keep saying a lot recently, we do think that technology does have an environmental impact. So I think this piece about the sort of the green internet, where technology fits in buildings, where technology fits in our life, I think that is a conversation, an emerging conversation we're going to be talking about a lot. So I think for lots of organizations, whilst we're all doing this, you know, remotely, let's begin to think about what the cost of remote is, because there is a cost to remote. So I think that's, for me, one of the big important technology conversations we're going to see coming. Technology meets environment. That's going to be a conversation we'll have over the next period. Yeah,
agreed. Just Kaitan, over to you. When your organization are looking for some new space, all of those other variables that we discussed, are they things that you take into account before you agree to take up a couple of floors in one of the buildings that you choose?
Yeah, absolutely. Working environment is a key thing for us. Working with developers and landlords that are providing those amenities that we've discussed in terms of, you know, LEED Gold or Platinum buildings, usable floor plates that we can configure for our clients. You know, one of the key things that we do for our clients is we create and customize our spaces for our clients' requirements. So being able to work with a landlord that is able to, you know, have those floor plates that we can work with is significantly important. We also believe, you know, hugely in the collaboration piece. So where our clients have, you know, typical offices within our spaces, you know, we have ample spaces for them to come out and have a, you know, an informal discussion with their team or meet a client. All of those things really play a vital part to it. But, you know, what I think what clients really do decide on from the foremost is if they're entering a new market, you know, is the location strategic for them? Does it offer the right amenities and well-being for their employees as well as their clients? You know, the infrastructure around it is really, really important as well. So there's a number of factors that we look at to make sure that we can deliver both from a client perspective, but to deliver our style in terms of working together about how we can attract the right clients that they're also potentially looking. So, you know, for example, if there's a, you know, fintech business that's looking to set up in a new market, we could be their partner simply because we're giving them the flexible space. So they're growing from 50 to 100 people, and eventually, you know, they'll know the landlord, they'll know the infrastructure, and they'll know the location. That typically they'll then take a floor plate within that building itself as a traditional lease. Yeah. So those conversations with landlords, with our clients that are continually ongoing, really help us to decide on where we need to be, what services we need to provide, what IT infrastructure is really important to them, so that they can patch all their offices in globally. So there's a whole host of factors, but typically good quality building, fantastic location, excellent amenities is what we look at.
Yeah, okay, agreed. We've had a few questions that actually have come through on the Q&A, and I had some of my own, but I thought we've probably got one more question in terms of the time, and we've kind of touched it on a little bit, but it was on staff retention, and Silke, maybe in terms of being aware of what your staff want and how important it is to provide environment that your staff are requiring. Has staff retention been discussed?
Absolutely. And staff retention and staff attraction is always one of the parameters that we're looking at. And also in terms of, how we create our space, how we, evaluate our smart working model, our workplace concept, and providing that space. And we have had all the words about, the well-being, the choice and flexibility. That is all part of the ultimate aim, effectively, that the workforce is happy and that we are providing space where people want to continue to work as well as start to work as well.
Yeah. Okay. I guess it just shows that the focus is sort of coming off looking at efficiency of space and are we going to have 100 square feet per person and what sort of cubicles we're going to have, to a bit more about how people are going to feel when they walk into the office, and will it promote a vibrant atmosphere that will hopefully in turn promote a successful business. So yeah, very, very interesting. Look, this is kind of flown by very, very quickly, and we're fast approaching sort of the slot that we had. So look, on behalf of Savills and anyone in the Middle East, thank you to all our panelists for joining us today. Thank you to the attendees that also joined us. As I said at the beginning, all of these webinars are recorded. They're available to be accessed via the website and also the Middle East Impacts landing page. We do have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks that I mentioned, I believe on the 10th of November, on life sciences and that sector, and that's something else that is a hot topic at the moment for obvious reasons. But other than that, thank you very much for all joining us today, and hope you have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.